The following is a local resident producer's program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everybody, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here, and Dan Rylance is joining me as well, like normal. You're not traveling this particular time.
Nope, I'm home.
Yeah, and we're happy about that too. We're very happy to be joined tonight by two sisters from the Oshkosh community. They're here to talk about a project called the 11 by 15 Project, and essentially it's an effort by a group of ecumenical folks to get the prison population in the state of Wisconsin reduced by 11,000 by the year 2015 rather. And so they're here to talk to us tonight about that, tell us why they've undertaken the project and gotten involved in it, and what really is all involved in this project. So with that, welcome to Sister Mary Barbier. I almost said how your family wants you to pronounce the name, but Sister Barbier and Sister Mary Jo Solinsky.
That's correct.
And so welcome to both of you.
Welcome.
We
Thank
appreciate
you.
very much you being here this evening.
I just wrote JMJ on the top of my questions now, so I feel like I'm
Jesus
where I
Catholic
should be.
Joseph.
All right,
Yeah.
there you go.
Remember those days?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, me too.
How we do.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. All right, so this is a project of wisdom. Now, wisdom is all in caps. I don't know, is that an acronym for something?
Yes, it's an acronym. Wisdom being wisdom scripturally.
Okay.
And I have to honestly say I don't know what they all stand for, but wisdom is the head in the state of Wisconsin, and it has 8 affiliates,
Okay.
of which Esther is one of the affiliates, and that's out of the valley and Esther Oshkosh area, and then there's Joshua in the Green Bay area. There are others too. And
Okay.
they're scriptural for, the acronyms, like Esther is empowerment, what's the word I want? Subsidiarity,
Okay.
trust, hope, and so on.
Okay.
So,
All right. So it's an acronym for something, but this is a project of wisdom, which is calling for alternatives to incarceration for a safer and healthier Wisconsin. And so this is, as I mentioned in the outset, about reducing the state's prison population by 11,000 in the next 4 years, 3 years. A very heavy-duty effort that you're taking on.
That's right.
Why are we looking at reducing the prison population? Maybe we can start there.
Well, our prison population in Wisconsin is way out of whack when we compare it with the states next to us. Minnesota, the demographics are pretty much the same for Wisconsin and Minnesota, and yet they have only about 11,000 and we have 22,000. And I keep saying, we're not that bad. Something's wrong. Especially Minnesota. Are they that much better than we are? So it's been looking at that, and what the other gal that presents with us is a social worker, and she said when she was studying, they used Minnesota as an example because they had less in their prisons and they had alternative programs. And so it's to make people aware that there are alternative programs which probably will do a better job of helping people to actually overcome whatever their problem is. Because what they do isn't necessarily the problem, it might be a symptom. But many of the people in our prisons are, they suffer from addictions or mental health problems. And those are health problems, so they should be addressed with, treatment instead of just throwing them in prison and expecting them to come out better without any help.
Sure. Why is the church or the faith community involved in this?
We see this as being part of our responsibility as Christians, regardless of what faith we profess. That's very scriptural, So we believe in the dignity of human beings, and we know from experience, from talking with people who have been incarcerated, who are incarcerated, that there's not a lot of dignity in being in prison,
Right.
and not a lot of rehabilitation. So even if there were more things going on in our prisons to rehabilitate the prisoners, that would have some merit, but that's not really happening in our prisons to any extent at all. And we know for a fact that the alternative programs are very successful. We have one right here in Winnebago County, STOP, Safe Streets Treatment Optional Program. And we know that people who go through that program, about 75% do not repeat. But we know people who are in prison and who are out, oftentimes the recidivism of that is about 75% back in.
Sure.
So there's a big difference in that. And also to give people an opportunity to have a good place in society for themselves. Once someone's convicted and is in prison and has a felony record, then we know chances of them, once they're out, of fitting into society is pretty slim. And that raises havoc with family, with the local community that they're in. So it presents a lot of other problems, whereas they could be much more productive if they were in a treatment program, got to the root of the cause, and got the help they needed. Then they would be more productive in community, for their family, and be happier people.
Okay. How did the number 11,000 come up and the year 2015 get picked? And by the way, is that at the start of 2015 or by the end?
By the end.
Okay.
It's by the end.
All right. So about 3.5 years is what you've got left then. So
That's right.
Okay. So how did these numbers get chosen then?
Looked at surrounding states and what their prison population is. And we know that Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, their prison population is about half of what ours is. And when we're talking budgets and so on, not that dollars should enter in, but the truth of the matter is they do. And it's a lot less expensive to have someone in a treatment program than to have them in prison. And then not only is it less expensive from a dollar sign point, but it also helps that person become productive in community and within their family.
Both Minnesota and Wisconsin both have a population, a little over 5 million, I think. Why are there so many people in prison in Wisconsin? Do we have tougher laws, more laws that put people in prison?
Well, I know Wisconsin's one of the states that if a 17-year-old commits some kind of a crime, they're automatically put into adult court.
Okay.
And we know from education that 17-year-olds, they're not mature enough to make wise decisions. But if you're put into adult court, it takes for granted that you're an adult and you should know what to do, and so into prison you go. So that would be one of the reasons that, and one of the things that we would hope we could take another look at.
Another piece of that is that in Minnesota, before they are put into prison, they have a lot more treatment programs than we do. Our state has really just come into the treatment program into the 1990s when Wisdom was very instrumental with other agencies to start, and we have what we call TAD, Treatment Alternative Diversion Programs. That's what STOP belongs. And those are grants. So we all know grant money goes only so far. You apply for grant money, and so we'd like to see more of the finances that goes into prisons be diverted over to treatment programs, and then we could have more treatment programs in our state. And in Minnesota, that's what they did before the alternative of prison was. They worked with these people. They got to the root causes. They found out what some of the difficulties were. And that's through case management. That just doesn't happen. So
We tried an early release program, I think a couple years ago in Wisconsin. I think when Governor Doyle was, I think that was stopped. So another possibility would be to have some early release programs? Are you familiar with those, or?
We haven't talked about
We
those
haven't.
in
Okay.
regard to this
Okay.
program. My guess would be that if that happens, you need to be sure you're helping people.
Just can't let
Because
them out.
That's
just
right.
because if they
Yeah.
come out, if they've not gotten any help while they're in,
Okay.
the recidivism is like 75% if you've
Okay.
not gotten treatment. But if you've gotten treatment, it's like 25% go back to doing it.
I just want to go back to the 17-year-old law
Yeah.
that was passed in 1996 in our state. And I think our legislature is beginning to realize that maybe wasn't the wisest choice to make. But at the time, it was probably, and this is a probable, made because it's less expensive to incarcerate a 17-year-old in an adult prison than it is to put him in a juvenile one. You know, like up at Lincoln or Wales or somewhere. So ultimately, up front, they were saving money, but down the road they are not, because once a juvenile, 17-year-old, is put into an adult prison system and they get out, the recidivism of them going is extremely high. And not only do they go back, but they go back committing more severe crimes than they did the first time around.
They have good teachers in prison.
That's
Yes,
right.
that's right. You're right,
Yeah,
Dan.
yeah, yeah.
What kinds of convicted folks are we talking about here that you'd like to see on some kind of an alternative program, whether it be STOP or the drug court or what have you? You know, what kinds of crimes have they been convicted of committing?
Well, it wouldn't be the violent kind of crime. That we're talking about those that have, you know, some kind of an addiction. Okay, they're stealing for drugs or something like that. But you know, on people that you can help. I couldn't name the crimes right off.
Well, it would be the DUIs,
Okay.
you know, and it would be the drug kinds of things, or mental illness, so they do something that's a little, from our perspective, a little bizarre or whatever, but it's because of the mental illness that they have. So we're not talking about violent offenders. That's a whole different
We're not
situation.
talking about sex offenders either?
That would depend upon the individual, I would think,
Okay.
and it would depend upon the case,
Okay.
because sometimes sex offenders who have that label, if we look at the situation,
May have been mislabeled.
that's right. That's right. It depends. But we're definitely talking about mental ill
Okay.
and addictive people who have addictions, whether it be drugs, whether it be alcohol, could be gambling.
Do you have
That's
any
an
idea
addiction.
what percent of the inmates in the state of Wisconsin fit those categories as opposed to hard crimes?
By far more of those than the hard crimes.
So if you could work on that area, you
majority,
could
yeah.
reduce your population.
That's right. I
Yeah.
took this out of the Oshkosh Northwestern probably about 6 months ago. Fewer criminal cases in 2011, but felony cases increased in our area. Now, a felony is different
Yep.
than the hard crime kinds of things. So it's the felony kinds of things that we're talking about. And the truth of the matter is, once someone has that on their record, it's pretty hard once they get out to fit into our society. You know, they fill out the application form, were you ever convicted of a felon? They have to check it.
Have you sampled the political climate at all? I mean, how do you want to achieve this reduction by 2015? Well, what's your strategy?
Strategy is that, first of all, in February, in front of courthouses,
Okay.
we were in front of the courthouse in Green Bay, and we had microphones and so on, and getting our message out of what this is all about and so on.
That
So
was the initiation of it.
that was right.
Okay. So that'd be kind of a kickoff.
That's
Yes.
right. We
Okay.
have the faith-based organizing, the groups behind us, because we really feel unless faith organizations are behind us, this would be difficult. So we have faith groups behind us. We are giving PowerPoint presentations to educate people. We have flyers. We have forums. Different. So it's in an educational state. In March of 2013, we're expecting about 1,000 people at Madison to really promote the 11 by 15 campaign. It's our understanding that there are legislative people who really see the need to change our system in our state. Now, whether they have the
Are you
wherewithal.
going to go after them and
Oh, yes.
encourage them
yes,
to?
in time.
Well, and part of the education is to get more people aware so that the legislators who really want to do this feel a little safer with
Sure.
their jobs and maybe doing
If their
it.
constituents understand it, they're
That's right.
more likely to help. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And is this something where you're hoping that if the law gets changed, it will evaluate a person on the case's own merits of the cases that they or the crimes that they've committed? For example, you've got a 17-year-old who is involved in a murder. You know, are you suggesting that all 17-year-olds should not be in prison, or
No,
is this going to be looked at on a case-by-case basis?
Yes.
Okay.
It
I
would
would say
definitely
so.
have to be looked
Yeah.
at a case by case.
Okay.
And that's how people should be treated, because everyone's circumstances are different. So depending upon individual circumstances would certainly, but right now it's not that way.
Right.
17-year-olds, DUI, whatever, adult court. So it's to take people, like we're not talking, I personally do not believe in zero tolerance, you know, because everyone's different. So what are the circumstances and situation that surround that?
Okay. Repeat offenders of, say, someone who drives drunk or under the influence multiple times. We hear about that all the time.
And they're still on the streets?
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes. Although they are cracking down, I think, more on them, or trying to anyway.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if they're a multiple offender, would this program suggest that they still remain in prison then?
This program would suggest that there are root causes to being a multiple offender of a DUI, and let's get to the root causes and put them into a treatment program that will help them.
Okay.
And I personally, in my own family, have experienced that with a nephew.
Okay.
So I can speak from experience on that.
Okay. All right.
I want to churn a little bit differently. I talked to you about this a little bit. Do you belong to the LCWR as nuns in the state of Wisconsin?
Our
Our-
community.
our-
And that's the
community.
Leadership Conference of Women Religious?
Yes.
Okay. You're currently sort of under investigation by the Vatican. Three bishops are arch. Could you just respond to that? Or are not you allowed to respond to that?
Well, technically, we're not allowed. We're allowed. I mean,
Okay.
we're allowed to do whatever
Sure.
we personally feel. I don't know that we would talk about it on camera as such, because we have a president
Okay.
and a president-to-be and our national order. See, the LCWR, what's under investigation is the national.
Right.
And under the national, throughout the state of Wisconsin, we have regions.
Okay.
For example, Wisconsin is LCWR Region 9.
Okay.
So, and it consists of leadership members from each community in the state of Wisconsin attending conferences in fall and in spring. And so I just was on leadership for our community and was involved with LCW. Wonderful group of people, just wonderful. And you know, I don't know if you know Simone Campbell, who's the executive director for Network at.
I do not.
Are you familiar with Network?
A little bit.
It was organized by 40 Catholic nuns like 40 years ago, and Simone they were the nuns on the bus
Okay.
that went around.
Right.
And Simone has spoken, and she speaks very vehemently. They are lobbyists in Washington, D.C., this organization.
Now, the church, that is the Vatican, is concerned about radical feminist agenda. Is this an example of trying to reduce the population of Wisconsin, an example of what they might consider a radical feminist agenda by nuns?
You know,
I don't think
go
so.
ahead,
I
Jill.
think this would be more under social justice.
I see.
Uh,
Okay.
So I don't think they would consider this radical feminism.
They have a pretty broad definition, though, of what's radical feminism, don't they? And they're all men.
How could you be Christian and not be a feminist?
Feminism,
Well, I
to
think
me,
that's...
is equal opportunity
Yeah,
for
I agree.
everyone.
That's
right.
And
That's
that's what
what it
Jesus
is.
was
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah.
So when you look at it that way,
Or, if you're the
Yeah.
church, why should you discourage dissent in an era of all these pre-sex scandals? I mean, shouldn't things, transparency, be open? I'm probably going to get you enough trouble, so I'm going to stop.
Well-
Go ahead.
We had an interesting experience in May. We were in Florida visiting my oldest sister, and the church we went to worship at, Father Joe is an Irish priest, a wonderful guy, and we've gone there many years. And after Matt, oh, you're the sisters from Wisconsin. He says, so how are you doing with this LCWR stuff? He says, they should be investigating us. So that's kind of what you're saying.
Well,
there.
exactly, and you said it much better than I did.
Yeah. Well, Father
Absolutely.
Joe said that to us. So.
Well, kudos to him.
Yeah. And thank you for responding.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
You're
both.
welcome.
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't mean to detour, but it's,
No, that's all right.
It's on the agenda.
I was hoping we could save that to the end, but so we'll bring it back around then to this. What other kinds of alternative programs have you seen in other states? Now we've got the STOP program here, we've got the drug court. We've had judges on in the past. Judge Wolk was on just not all that long ago, talking about some of the other things that they'd like to try in Winnebago County. What things are you seeing in other states that have been successful?
I haven't seen anything in other states. I'm just, this is my part of the presentation, so to speak. And we're like a little cog in the wheel in the state of Wisconsin. So I trust the people that
Sure.
have given us the information. I don't know offhand what they are. I think you had a couple. that you
Veterans
were-
courts have been quite successful in other
Veterans
states.
courts.
Veterans.
Now, what's involved in that?
Well, when some of this whole thing, when the veterans are no longer serving, they have some real psychological problems and so on, and rather than and probably are offending in ways that if they weren't having some of the problems they're having as a result of the war and being a veteran and so on, they would probably be in prison. So instead, they go to the veterans courts, and this is what's happening. And exactly how the judges deal with that, I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
But there are veterans courts, and there are drug courts, there are mental health courts, and I think most of those are quite successful. I think whenever you reach out and help people to get to the root of their cause, of why this behavior is going on, and help them, I think it can't be anywhere but up, be
Sure.
successful.
Let me just play devil's advocate here, because I think this is a great cause, and I commend you guys and everyone else involved in this. Here's what I see as maybe a stumbling block. Everybody is having their budgets cut. The mental health community has seen their budgets cut, especially if it's a state type institution like we have Winnebago County, here in Winnebago County. So if we're putting more people into treatment type programs, then the treatment facilities are going to have to employ more people, their budgets are going to increase, salaries are going to increase, all of that will happen. Where will that money come from? You're saving money in the courts, but then you're getting more money that's having to be raised and spent in another area of the state budget. How have other states dealt with that? Do you know?
Well, I don't know exactly how they have, but I would see how Wisconsin could deal with it. If you're putting them in treatment programs, obviously that cost has to go up. It's a lot cheaper to service someone for a year in a treatment program than it is for a year in prison. So that money that is in excess, they're not going into prison. So now
So
we have
divert it.
That's
divert
right.
the money,
So now we
yes.
have the flow from the prisons into the treatment programs.
I think the cost is around $25,000 per inmate in Wisconsin.
And I think it's around $9,000 in a treatment program.
Okay, so your point's well taken.
The state doesn't really like to shove money around, though, so there's going to be another uphill battle.
That's right.
But yeah, diverting the money would be the obvious solution.
That's right.
So now you got to get the politicians on board to do that.
That's a
that's
hope
right.
along the line. Yes.
That's right. But where budgets are tight and they're looking for
Yeah.
places to cut.
Yep.
And if it's cheaper, why wouldn't you? I mean, that's how we operate in our living situations, isn't it?
And some of this is so much common sense, and yet we don't see too often, or maybe often enough is a better way to put it, common sense coming from our lawmakers.
Well,
It's
and a
very
lot of
difficult
it
to get them to change their minds.
It's fear.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is fear-based. We can't have these people around us. But if they're helped, they're human beings. And we find out, and you talk with them, they're another human being.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot of it, I think, is the fear. So much that happens in our world today is based on fear.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in a 24-hour news cycle where we see
Yes.
these things
That's right,
constant,
yes.
all the time.
One of the statistics in the flyer that I shared with you, Cheryl, I don't know if Dan got it, is that recent study shows that the state of Wisconsin saves $1.93 with every dollar it spends on community-based alternatives to incarceration. So a dollar, that's almost double.
Yeah.
You would think your fiscal argument would get some support.
Hopefully.
But the other point I want to make besides the fiscal piece of it, because that is important, is that if we are helping people to become more the person they are meant to be, then that person will be more productive in their family, they will be more productive in our community. And that, I think, is a really big piece also, as well as the dollars and cents.
So other than doing things like talking to Dan and I, talking to church groups, you know, being in mass at the state capitol and at courthouses and things like that, other than getting the word out, what else are you doing to kind of move this forward? Are certain members of your group charged with contacting lawmakers, or how does this really all work?
I think that's what's happening. But see, this is a big statewide, so there are some that are going to be working with lawmakers
Okay.
and getting that going.
And we meet monthly.
Yeah.
So, and I would say there are probably 20 or so that meet monthly to talk about what's our next step here in this area and so on. So I don't see it as a problem because people are really committed to moving it forward.
Okay.
And as it moves forward, surprising things happen. It was surprising how they said how many people really jumped on. They said, oh my gosh, we're getting letters and we're getting, a lot of people are really interested in this, which nobody really knew for sure how it was going to be taken when they first
And
put
these
it out
people
there.
are success. You know, Esther, which they're part
Yes.
of, is the was the impetus for the
by
women's
the
shelter in
women's
Oshkosh.
shelter.
So
That's right.
you know,
Yes.
they're batting.
Uh-huh.
You know, they're
Yes.
not below percentage.
And Esther also has done a tremendous amount for transit.
Okay.
But it hasn't affected us in Oshkosh, but it has affected the Green Bay and Appleton area big time. They were even in Madison, in DC lobbying and so on in order to get what needed to be passed. And you understand that piece of it a little better than I do with the transit, about the monies that
There
were
was
being
a certain
diverted.
amount of monies that could only be used, they couldn't be used for bus repairs or running the buses. So you could have all kinds of money to pay the people, but if your buses were broken down, you couldn't use it for that. And ultimately, what would have happened is that a number of bus lines would have been taken off in Appleton. And eventually in Oshkosh, because we're getting into that area, and it had to do with the last census population,
Okay.
that if it comes up to about 200,000 or so. But the difference was, at the peak time of bus running, there's not as many buses as there are in an inner city. And so they said, you know, this is going to really affect us, but we have to be able to use the money for how it's going to help us.
Sure, sure.
So they managed to get that to happen, so they didn't have to take off the bus routes, and especially bus routes later where it would help people who didn't have any other way to work.
Maybe work second
home.
shift or
That's
something.
right.
Yeah. All right, very good. Well, we're out of time, but this is a worthwhile cause, and if folks at home would like to get involved in this, we've been putting this website address up throughout the segment, but it's prayforjusticeinwi.org. Again, prayforjusticeinwi.org. So just contact the website and find out how you can get involved, or better yet, help out with the cause in some way. So thanks to both of you very much for being here. We
Thank you for
appreciate it so
having
much.
us.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
Sure, and good luck.
Yes,
Thank
We're
you
going to
very
take a
much.
short break, and when we come back, our Winnebago County District Attorney Christian Gossett will be here. We'll be right back.
Every year, the U.S. Department of the Treasury receives about 1.4 million reports of problems with paper checks. Checks can be lost, stolen, or delayed. If you still receive Social Security payments by paper check, Treasury wants you to know about a safer, more convenient way to get your money. The Direct Express Prepaid Debit MasterCard. The Direct Express card is new and is available to anyone receiving Social Security benefits, even if you don't have a bank account. Your monthly benefits will be automatically placed onto your card account each month on the day your money is due. While other debit cards cost money, it is possible to use the Direct Express card for free to make purchases, pay bills, and get cash at thousands of locations nationwide. There are no sign-up or monthly account fees. No more waiting for the mail or worrying about lost or stolen checks. Call 1-877-212-9991 or visit www.usdirectexpress.com.
And welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. Christian Gossett, our county district attorney, is here now. We're going to be talking mostly about his litigation that is currently pending against our judges here in Winnebago County about their refusal to allow district attorneys from his office to carry concealed weapons in the courtroom. This is kind of a touchy subject because in most of our public buildings, we're seeing that there are signs posted outside that you can't carry weapons inside the buildings. It certainly is the case here at City Hall. It's at the courthouse. However, the state law says that district attorneys can carry concealed weapons.
Correct.
Or some of the district attorneys in the office, like the DA and the assistant DA, I think, or something like that.
Yeah. And did you want me to try to explain the law a little bit?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Because it's complicated.
It is complicated, and actually, when it first came out, everybody ran around and tried to get it broken down very, very quickly. We worked with the Attorney General's office back and forth quite a bit, trying to sort it out. But what we have is we have a law that is a permissive law. Okay, so the law says with concealed carry permits, citizens can carry firearms basically everywhere, unless otherwise prohibited. All right, so we start out with it's permissive. It's like freedom of speech. So you're allowed to do it unless there's something that says you can't in the statute. One of the things that they specifically say you can't do is you cannot carry a firearm in a courthouse or a courtroom unless you're a judge, a district attorney, an assistant district attorney, or a person that the court has given authorization to. Okay, and the language is very, very clear. It's that straightforward. So the legislature passed a law that says prosecutors, essentially, if they have a CCW permit, they can carry in a courtroom. Now, the ones that you're talking about are different. They allow people to prohibit firearms in various areas. Employers can prohibit firearms. So ironically, I could prohibit my people from carrying firearms into the office, but I can't prohibit them because they have a statutory right to carry a firearm into a courthouse or a courtroom.
And can I just clarify something else here? Is it just the DA and the assistant DA, or because there's the DA, there's a deputy DA,
Correct.
And then you've got assistant DAs underneath.
Yes, and we'll have to wait and see what the judge's response is, but everybody assumes that by district attorney and the assistant district attorneys, they mean all of their district attorney's assistants, including the deputy, even though not specifically specified in the statute.
Because I looked at that
We
when
looked at
this
that
first
too.
started, and I thought,
The law says assistant, it doesn't say district or
Correct.
deputy, so we
Correct.
don't know. Assistant's probably plural.
Yeah, and so how we're interpreting it, I think how everybody so far has interpreted that is just if you're an assistant to the elected district attorney, whether you're a deputy or an assistant district attorney.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, and so now this lawsuit came about because why?
Well, it was an interesting situation. I got notice from two of our judges told two of our prosecutors, just after court on random days, said, we've talked about it as judges. We've decided we're not going to let you guys carry firearms in our courtrooms. And at this point in time, the CCW law, I don't even think had gone into effect entirely. So I went to a meeting with the judges and I said, well, yeah, I understand that you may want to do that, but legally I don't think you can. Because the statute is pretty clear on this. So we had a little heated discussion about it, and the last thing I knew was they said, well, we're going to talk about it a little bit, we'll get back to you. And then I was at a different meeting a few weeks later, and there was a rule that was being passed around that the judges had passed about prohibiting firearms. And I checked a couple times afterwards and said, well, are you guys sure? Do you want to talk about this? And I was told, no, they're set. So it puts me in a weird spot, in part because what do I do as the district attorney in Winnebago County if a prosecutor carries a firearm in a courtroom? Do I charge them with contempt? Because their defense is going to be that the law allows them to do it. And I think that's a pretty good defense. So, and it's not just our prosecutors. We could have prosecutors from other counties come and walk into our courthouse with firearms. Same problem.
Does our state law allow judges, whether it be in this county or one of the other, how many counties do we have? 72?
72
Okay.
counties, yeah.
or in any one of the other 71 counties, does our state law allow judges to set rules in their own courtroom?
Yes, and this is what's going to be interesting about this case, because only the higher courts are going to be able to tell us if this is something that courts are going to be allowed to do, because for the last 150 years or so, they can say, no, the rule that you passed interferes with courtroom procedure, so it makes it so that we can't run our courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if they said every criminal case has to be disposed of in 10 days, and the court said, that's not possible, we can't do that, that's unreasonable, we have to change that, and you have to give us more time. The courts have always enjoyed the ability to do that so that they can function properly. But this one has nothing to do with court functioning. And just by its very nature, a concealed weapon is one that nobody would know was there. So there's not really a way that it interferes with the court's scheduling, the day-to-day operations, the sound system. Everything functions the same. So this is a non-procedural issue.
Okay.
I've been going over checking the doors of the courts yesterday and today on what cannot be brought into the rooms. Okay? No hats, food, or beverages. No cell phones, video cameras, or cameras. And it cites as a statute, unless other approved by the court prior to any court proceedings, and they cite SCR Chapter 61.
One thing I should point out is SCR is not a statute.
Okay. The Supreme Court ruling, is that what it?
It stands for Supreme Court
All right,
rules,
okay.
which are guidelines.
Okay.
And it's interesting because
But that's what they're citing.
That's what they're citing.
okay.
But if you look through the Supreme Court guidelines, really they're called rules, but they're guidelines. One of the things that they talk about is in a county with multiple courts like this, our courts should specialize. Some should do criminal, some should do civil, but they don't.
Okay.
And we've had those discussions where we've said that would really help us out from an efficiency standpoint in the DA's office if we had 3 criminal courts instead of 6 courts doing everything. So the Supreme Court rules, they cite to them, but they understand and they acknowledge that they're not really rules.
Yeah.
They're
Did you
suggestions.
find these unacceptable?
No
hats, food, beverage, no cell phones, video cameras, or cameras in the courtroom?
Well, some of them. And cell phones are sort of, the cell phone rule is a little vague. The cell phone has to do with, we take our cell phones in
Right.
and defense attorneys take their cell phones in. We have defense attorneys, we have one court that we can't quite figure out the rules. We have defense attorneys who pull out their cell phones to schedule matters. But then if the prosecutor pulls out the phone to check on the status of a case, that's prohibited, but the scheduling is okay. So the rules
so it's
are
a little arbitrary.
yeah, they're a little bit vague, but they're generally there. And I think what they're trying to do in some of that, the posting on the phones, whether or not it needs to be as broad as it is.
It doesn't elaborate. One sign just said no cell phones.
Yeah.
And what are
one
they
said
going
no
to do?
cell phones.
Frisk people before they come in?
They could, in theory.
It says they can cite them with contempt of court.
Yeah.
And you've got reporters who historically will take tape recorders in
Yeah.
to make sure that they're getting quotes right and so forth. And because you can obviously record things faster than you can write things.
Yeah.
But
in the courts, even the higher courts have not been real open to the idea of people recording things. And I don't know what to make of that. I mean, I live my life on the record, so it doesn't matter
Well,
to
it's
me if
all
people...
a matter of record anyway.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter to me
So-
if people are videotaping me, photographing me. I do know that we did have a couple incidents, and sometimes, rules are passed with good intentions, but perhaps the collateral damage should be considered. We have had a couple situations where we've had people come into courtrooms and try to videotape witness testimony, confidential informants on drug cases at preliminary hearings is one of them, so that they can intimidate the people. But we've dealt with those on a case-by-case basis, and when it comes up, we go over and tell them to knock it off, and they do. But there are things where a phone ringing in a courtroom could disrupt court proceedings.
Okay, now the judge's rule that you disagree with, no one other than and this is the Fond du Lac, no one other than a Fond du Lac County judge or an on-duty sworn law enforcement personnel may carry a weapon in any courtroom.
Yeah, so Fond du Lac's rule is a little bit different.
Okay,
Fond du Lac,
but on both of them, they use the word inherent authority to
Yeah.
address and control issues within their courtrooms.
right.
What is inherent authority?
That's a constitutional separation of powers. So as
Okay.
judges, kind of like we were talking about, if the legislature were to say you have to dispose of all of your cases in 10 days, they could say, no, that makes us ineffective.
Okay.
So you can't do that. Or if the legislature said you now have to handle 10,000 additional matters in 1 year, and they said that's not possible, we can't do that,
Okay.
they can say no if it will keep the judiciary from functioning as the judiciary. They have the ability to say no, you can't do that to us because we're a separate power. And of course, and this is an interesting, from the separation of power standpoint, this is
I agree.
fascinating
Yeah.
because the fight here, even though I'm an elected member of the executive branch of government, the fight here is between the legislature and the judiciary.
Yes.
Who gets to make the rules?
Right.
Most people assume that the legislature can pass the
Right.
laws, but that's being challenged here. I'm in the middle of it, so is my deputy district attorney, but we know we don't get to make the rules.
So in the end, if the Court of Appeals takes your thing, the issue is between what's in the concealed weapon law versus the inherent authority of the judges?
Actually, it's which one gets to make the rule.
Or which one gets to make
Yeah,
the rule?
because right now we have competing rules.
Okay.
We have the law passed by the legislature and the law passed by the judges. Which one wins?
Well, I think the scarier issue here, I mean, courthouse security is scary in and of itself, but if the judges are allowed to essentially override state law, then what else might they be able to override? Can they override federal law?
Yeah.
Can they override other state laws?
And that kind of gets to the
It's a
core.
slippery slope.
Yeah, exactly. That gets to the heart of the problem is we know we believe we know where the line is drawn now.
Yeah.
Procedural issues. Well, is this moving that line? And if so, where's the new line?
Yeah. Well, we don't know at this point whether the courts are overstepping
Yeah,
their
we don't
bounds.
know.
We don't
That's
know
what.
that.
Yep. That's why I said we're asking because we think we know it's here,
Right.
and we think this would push it here, and so first we need the higher courts to tell us
Right.
yes or no, it's pushing the line, and yes or no, it's allowed. And the appellate court has taken this up.
Well, they have.
Yeah, they well, sort of. They at least ordered the judges to respond.
Better than the higher Supreme Court.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
okay.
Supreme Court. Yeah, we were hoping to cut right to the chase,
Yeah,
go right to the
okay.
top, and ask them to, because we thought it was a big enough issue.
Sure.
And as you point out, Fond du Lac has passed a rule, and some of the
Right.
other counties are passing rules, and so this is
They
this
got to
is
deal with it probably.
Somebody's got to.
Yeah.
So we thought we'd go to the top. They said no. We said okay.
But so far, there's only 2 lawsuits that have been filed, here and in Fond du Lac County.
Oh, was there one filed in Fond du Lac?
I believe it wasn't it?
Or
Or there was something, but there was.
their rule is in effect.
Oh, yeah.
I don't
Okay.
think.
Actually, there's
Okay.
rules effect in Milwaukee County, Kenosha
Milwaukee.
County, Dane County, Waukesha County. But what's interesting about all of those counties is they went to the district attorneys and worked out
Worked together.
arrangement. Yeah, they worked
Right.
together. And in our county, it was, we're doing this, go pound sand. And I
Okay,
said, oh.
can I cut to the chase? Are you fighting with I mean, is this a bad relationship that you have between the judges and yourself?
It's soured a lot over
Okay.
this because well, you said yourself you went over and looked at those orders.
Yeah.
The only people that those orders apply to are prosecutors.
Okay.
They apply to nobody else.
Why is that?
Because the state law already says the only people who can carry in the courtrooms are judges and prosecutors and people that judges give permission to. They changed the rule to say nobody can. But by passing the rule under inherent authority, they're acknowledging that they each have the inherent authority to ignore their own rule. So it doesn't apply to judges.
Yeah.
It doesn't apply to anybody else. It doesn't even apply to law enforcement officers because they weren't given the right under the statute either. So the only people in Winnebago County, there are 11 people that this rule of the courts applies to. It's an anti-prosecutor position.
I understand.
So yeah, it's soured it.
Yeah, yeah.
Does their prohibition, if you will, also include knives and stun devices? Because those are permitted under the law, correct?
Yeah, I don't know. I took issue with the general principle of the separation of powers.
Well,
Slingshots are okay.
Yeah, slingshots might be all right.
and so do you have any idea when the Court of Appeals or the appellate court will be making a decision? How long do they have to make a
They
decision?
gave the courts 14 days to respond, to
Okay.
file a response.
Starting when?
I believe Monday or Tuesday of this week, I think.
Okay, so
Um,
end of
So
July.
a couple weeks from now, yeah.
Okay.
Christian, either side can appeal this, so it could go up to the Supreme Court
Yep.
anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In theory, it could be.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
more than likely.
And more than likely, yeah. And the Supreme Court, you don't really know why they didn't want to hear it, and but one reason could simply be they wanted the case developed more.
Which is normal for the highest court to do.
Yeah, it is. I mean, really,
Yeah.
what they did is they said go back and do it the same way that everybody does
Gotta
it.
start in the minor leagues.
Right, exactly. They
Yeah.
knocked us down, and we went, and they were
Yeah.
fine to do it.
Judges don't like to rule on judges, though, either, do they?
I don't know, but I'll tell you, everybody that I see, wherever I go, people talk about this, and that's where most people go right away. The analysis goes there and stops there, and I don't know. I mean, the appellate courts and the Supreme Court review what circuit court judges do all the time, and the Supreme Court reviews what the Court of Appeals does all the time.
Okay,
But this one, as you mentioned right at the beginning, this is a contentious topic. And on its face, when we're right at the surface here, everybody goes, ooh, guns, for or against them. Well, if you just go to guns, you kind of miss the point. And
That's not your point.
no.
But I think in some of the early releases, that was confusing.
Yeah,
Like you
yep.
said a minute ago, that it was kind of muddled. And,
Yeah.
That makes more understanding the way you've explained it now.
So like I said, to me, it's legally such a fascinating issue.
it is.
But boy, what a weird one to be stuck in the middle of.
If you had oatmeal there instead of guns, it would.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's a lot of times what I tell people is pick your favorite civil liberty.
Yes.
What's important to you, and do you think judges should be able to override statutes, constitutional rights? And that's what this is about, is where are the lines to be drawn, and we'll get an answer one way or the other, and whatever it is, that'll be it.
This is maybe off the table here, but I grew up with a lot of lawyers in another state.
Sorry.
But good friends. Shouldn't this be done between you and the judges? And isn't there any mediation that you guys could work this out?
Boy, you would certainly hope so,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
apparently not.
Okay.
No.
Have you made overtures to them?
I asked to go to their judges meeting
Okay.
initially after I was told that they were going to do this,
Yeah.
and it was pretty contentious. Partially my fault because I walked in with a chip on my shoulder because I was upset that they thought they could do it, and they started out with a chip on their shoulder because they thought, boy, you're not going to question our authority. So it probably wasn't the most productive conversation. But at the end of that meeting, it left with them saying, well, we'll talk about it and we'll get back to you. And there were no further discussions. And
No brats and beer. party?
No brats and beer, no donuts, no conversations. And even before we filed the action, we have a judge who's assigned to the criminal courts, or to the DA's office, basically, the criminal part of the court system. Went to him twice and said, are you sure you guys don't want to rethink this? No.
So they're firm on their side.
Yeah, they're firm on their side. So it doesn't really leave much room to
No.
talk.
There is no talk.
But, and I made the point earlier, and we've talked about this on other shows, the much bigger issue, besides a potential violation of civil liberties and what have you, is courthouse security in this county is laughable
Yeah.
at best.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go to any other county and they've got some kind of security measure
Yeah.
in place, it seems. Outagamie County has for years. I don't know about Fond du Lac County, but I think most do. And this, we've got nothing. We've got one or two roaming officers between the two buildings, one the safety building and one the courthouse itself. They can't, if there's something going down at the courthouse and they're at the safety building, they can't do any good at the courthouse. Cameras that are in every room, they're not going to stop anything if all hell breaks loose in a courtroom. And, you know, we did try security shortly after 9/11.
Yep, that's right.
You know, I thought that was at least some kind of a half-hearted effort. Weak as it may have been, it was at least something more than what we have now, because now we're back to pretty much nothing again. And that's not to impugn the character or the ability of the 2 or 3 officers that are roaming around or who rotate on schedules or what have you. That's just the fact of the matter. They can't be in more than one place at a time.
Yeah.
And so what are we going to do about courthouse security?
Yeah, and you know, there is a courthouse security committee. We've been meeting for years. We talk about things. You know, it always comes down to dollars.
Sure.
Yeah, and I actually do accept that there is a cost-benefit analysis that has to be done with any risk. But at the same time, I think complacency, relying on the argument that nothing bad has happened, therefore nothing bad will happen, we don't want to do that. One of our biggest dilemmas is the building itself, the courthouse. I think it has 8 different entrances. When you walk in the main entrance off the parking lot, you have 3 different directions you can go right away and no hallway space. So once somebody walks in the door, and part of the problem they had before was if it's raining and it's the start of the workday, or if it's snowing, you may be standing in line for quite a while outdoors in the elements. And even worse than rain or snow for attorneys is you might be out there in a suit in 100-degree weather, waiting to get through these lines. So it would be a pretty big renovation. We've talked about possibly adding an area out onto the deck area, the patio area there, coming out, expanding the building a little bit.
That everyone would have to go through that entrance.
Right, and everybody would have to go through that entrance, and then there's historical, requirements because the building is a historical site. So it does get complicated, and it's not long before you're looking at a $10 to $15 million fix, and obviously I would prefer to have a secured courthouse, but we're also at a time where money's tight for everybody. Is a $10 million project? I really don't know what the answer is. We've been having some great debates and discussions. We recently had the sheriff arrange to have the U.S. Marshal Service come in and do an analysis of the courthouse. So we've got a lot of information to work with, and we've got some plans in place to make some big changes to the courthouse, in part because we have the 2 courtrooms that are outside of the courthouse. We're looking at moving those over. So there's an awful lot that's being discussed and debated. But as it sits right now, if you want to go in and do something bad in that building.
Well, and the only person who can see everything from where they sit is the judge.
Well, and the clerk and the court reporter.
Well, but the clerk and the court reporter is usually facing to the side.
Yeah.
So there's really only 1 or 2 people who can see everything that's going on. It really goes to security for everybody in the building, whether you're a plaintiff, a defendant, a member of the courthouse, or just a member of the general public, whatever it may be. You mentioned to me one time that you had talked to them about perhaps just moving the tables a little bit, the defense table and the district attorney's table, so that you'd have a better view. What happened with that?
We've talked about numerous things over the years, and one of the suggestions I had is prosecutors and defense attorneys come into most courtrooms and sit so that their back is completely to everybody else in the courtroom. We face the judge and the bench, and so I had suggested canting the tables. Because most entrances are through the center, and that would at least give the attorneys, out of their peripheral views.
Shot right away.
If movement is happening, you're likely to notice it, whereas we don't know right now. It's not that uncommon for somebody to come up, walk through, and tap me on the shoulders, and catch me off guard because I'm not expecting it while a court's going on. But if they were just tilted slightly, that would at least let us see the movement. And one of our judges did change their courtroom a little bit to accommodate that.
And the others?
Not so far.
What's their reasoning?
Oh, I don't know. I just asked.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
So this might be happening.
It could at some point in time, yeah. There's there's a lot of different things that happen in different places. The Courthouse Security Committee meeting, or the Courthouse Security Committee includes one judge. And she's very engaged in a lot of the discussions about the safety and security of the courthouse. The other conversations take place in judges' meetings. We'll be invited to ask questions, present on things, stuff like that. Or we have things that we will send through our liaison judge. Judge Jorgensen is the judge assigned to the DA's office. So things go in different ways. And that one I'm still hoping for.
Okay. Can you answer something for me? I've heard for years, and I don't know if there's truth to this or not, I've heard for years that the judges' benches are bulletproof, and that at least one judge has a panic button in either his courtroom or in his chambers or somewhere. Are these just rumors, or is there some truth to this?
Well, the Supreme Court rules call for bulletproof benches.
Okay.
So that's true. The panic button system, quite honestly, I'm not sure what the status of it is anywhere in the courthouse.
Okay.
There's buttons everywhere, but I don't think a lot of them
Nobody knows
work,
what for sure they do.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So
Do any judges carry weapons?
I don't know. There's sort of an ironic part to this, which is the concealed carry law. The idea is it's a secret.
I know.
We're not, as law enforcement, we are not allowed to ask people. And here, to defend our rights, we have to put it in writing and put it out there. And even by virtue of having to ask permission on a daily basis, the judge then in there presiding as their rule. Well, once you disclose that you have a firearm, you've actually made it a more dangerous environment for everyone involved. When I was doing research on shootings in courtrooms, they happen one of two ways that I've been able to find. They're taken from armed bailiffs, or they're snuck into the courtroom. I can't find a single incident of somebody taking one from a prosecutor or a judge. But if you think about it, this makes sense. Because if you've just received a really bad sentence or a really bad ruling and you're mad, if you see an armed deputy, the bailiff, with a firearm, you see a prosecutor in a suit, and you see a few other random people in the courthouse, you've got probably 30 seconds to make your move. You know where there's a firearm. Are you really going to go tackle a prosecutor, frisk them, while the armed bailiff is possibly? You're just not going that route. So there's a lot of things that I think were never really thought about.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but
Okay.
just you don't even have a weapon that could be considered concealable, correct?
No, I have my, from when I was a police officer, I have my service weapon. It's a full-size service weapon, and I own a shotgun that my father-in-law gave me, which I honestly don't even know if it works or not. It's a very old shotgun, and I've never fired it.
So this really is about principle more than anything, I guess.
Yeah, what I've been telling people is you'll know if I'm packing heat in the courthouse because I'll be wearing a parka.
Okay, very good. Well, on that
Otherwise,
note,
it's not concealed.
on that note, we are out of time. So thanks very much for being
was
here.
enjoyable.
We appreciate it
Thank
very
you.
much,
I
and
always
keep us
appreciate
posted
it.
on this. So,
Certainly.
all right, that's going to do it for us. We will see you next time. Until then, take care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.